Lyra Voss learned early in life that the word Omega was not just a rank, it was a sentence. In the Silverfang Kingdom, where wolves were born into a strict order of power, an Omega stood at the very bottom, beneath even the lowest soldier or servant. She had not chosen this place. She had simply been born into it, and the world never let her forget it. By the time she turned 20, Lyra had been rejected 5 times. 5 royal wolves, each one a prince from a different allied kingdom, had looked at her during the selection ceremony and turned away without a single kind word. The selection ceremony was an old tradition, one that every noble family took seriously. Wolves believed that inside every one of them lived a beast, a deeper instinct that could sense a true mate the moment their eyes met. If the beast recognized someone, it would kneel. It was said this instinct never lied. But no beast had ever knelt for Lyra. Instead, she collected stares filled with pity and whispers that followed her through palace halls. Some called her unlucky, others said she was cursed. Her own parents, ashamed of the embarrassment she brought to their family name, had begun speaking quietly about marrying her off to an aging lord who cared more about land than love. Nobody asked Lyra what she wanted. Nobody ever did. She spent her days keeping to herself, tending to the palace gardens because the plants never judged her. She talked to the roses more than she talked to people. It was easier that way. The roses did not care that she was an Omega. They simply grew, no matter who watered them. Then came the announcement that changed everything. The Grand Convergence was returning after 10 long years. It was a rare and enormous gathering where royal wolves from every allied kingdom traveled to one palace, hoping to find their true mates through the old ceremony. Some called it magic, others called it fate. Whatever it was said to be more powerful than the smaller selection ceremonies held within a single kingdom, because it was guided by the ancient magic of the moon ancestors themselves. Lyra did not want to go. She had been rejected enough times to last a lifetime, but her parents insisted, seeing one final chance to be free of their embarrassment. If she was rejected again in front of every kingdom, they reasoned, at least everyone would finally accept the truth and let her marry the old lord in peace. If, by some miracle, she was chosen, their family's shame would vanish overnight. Either way, they had nothing to lose. Lyra had everything to lose, but nobody asked her that either. The morning of the convergence, the grand hall of Ashgrave Palace was filled with more nobles and royals than Lyra had ever seen in one place. Banners from a dozen kingdoms hung from the high ceilings. The air smelled of candle smoke and perfume. Lyra stood near the back, wearing a simple gray dress that made her feel even smaller among the silks and jewels of the other candidates. She had heard of King Damian Ashgrave before, of course. Everyone had. He was the most powerful alpha king across the allied kingdoms, feared for his strength in battle, and respected for the discipline of his rule. It was also whispered that his beast had gone silent years ago. He had rejected every candidate presented to him for the past decade, and many believed he was cursed to rule without ever finding a true mate. Some said he no longer even hoped to find one. He attended ceremonies now only because tradition demanded it, not because he expected anything to come of them. When the ceremony began, wolves were called forward one by one, kingdom by kingdom, to stand before the Alpha King and see if his beast would respond. Prince after prince, princess after princess, they exchanged the customary bow with him. Each time, the king's eyes remained calm and unmoved. No kneeling, no recognition, just silence, kingdom after kingdom, as it had been for years. Lyra's family had signed her up to attend, mostly to be near the ceremony for appearances, without truly expecting her to be called forward for the king himself. But near the end of the gathering, an official read a list of remaining unmatched candidates from smaller houses, hoping to finish the tradition properly. Lyra's name was read aloud by mistake, a clerical oversight nobody had caught earlier. A ripple of muffled laughter spread through the crowd. Surely even the magic of the moon ancestors could not undo what nature had already decided about her. Her mother's hand pressed firmly into her back, pushing her forward before she could protest. Lyra's legs felt heavy as she walked toward the front of the hall, feeling every pair of eyes on her, feeling the weight of every past rejection pressing down on her chest. She kept her gaze low, expecting nothing different this time. She was used to disappointment. She had learned to expect it before it arrived, so it would hurt a little less. When she finally lifted her eyes to meet the king's, something in the room changed. King Damien's entire body went still. His breathing seemed to stop for a moment. Then, without warning, he stepped down from the raised platform where he had been standing and lowered himself before her. Not a polite nod, not a formal bow of courtesy. He knelt completely, one knee to the marble floor, his head bowed low, in the exact manner reserved only for a true fated mate of the highest recognition. The grand hall fell into stunned silence. Whispers began to rise almost immediately, spreading from row to row like fire through dry grass. The feared Alpha King, who had rejected every candidate for 10 years, had knelt before an Omega that every other royal wolf had turned away. Lyra stood frozen, unable to speak. She searched his face for any sign that this was some cruel joke, some trick meant to humiliate her further. But there was nothing but sincerity in his expression, and something else too, something that looked almost like relief, as though a long search had finally come to an end. "My beast has chosen," Damien said, his voice steady despite the shock still visible in his eyes. "It has never bowed like this before. Not once, in all my years of searching." The nobles who had once laughed now stared in disbelief. The very princes who had rejected Lyra in earlier ceremonies suddenly pushed forward, trying to object, trying to claim there had been some mistake, some trick of the light. Their sudden interest had nothing to do with genuine feeling, and everything to do with the realization that an Omega, chosen by the Alpha King himself, might carry a rare and valuable bloodline, one whispered about in old legends, but never confirmed in living memory. It was said that such a pairing could awaken ancient gifts, capable of strengthening an entire kingdom. But King Damien did not hesitate. He rose to his feet, took Lyra's trembling hand in his, and turned to face the entire hall. "This is my true mate," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent room, with the authority of a king who would not be questioned. "No rank, no rumor, and no jealousy will change what my beast has already recognized. She will be my queen." The declaration sent the hall into another wave of murmurs, but none dared speak against him directly. A king's bow was considered sacred among wolves, older and more binding than any noble title or political arrangement. To challenge it openly would be to challenge the very foundation of their traditions. In the days that followed, Lyra found herself in a world completely different from the one she had known. She moved from the quiet corner of a garden to the center of palace life, surrounded by servants, advisors, and curious eyes that no longer looked at her with pity, but with a strange mixture of awe and suspicion. It was overwhelming. She often found herself missing the simplicity of her old life, even with all its loneliness. Damien noticed her struggle. Despite his fierce reputation on the battlefield, he was patient with her in private, sitting with her in the same gardens she used to visit alone, asking about the flowers she had grown to love. He did not rush her, did not demand she suddenly transform into a confident queen overnight. He simply stayed beside her, steady and constant, proving through small moments that his declaration in the grand hall had not been about position or prophecy, but about her. "You don't have to be anyone other than who you are," he told her one evening, as they walked together beneath the moonlight. "My beast did not bow for a crown or a bloodline, it bowed for you." Slowly, Lyra began to believe him. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as an Omega to be dismissed, but as a person worth choosing. However, not everyone accepted the new queen so easily. Whispers of the old prophecy grew louder each day, reaching the ears of rival nobles who feared what a united bloodline between an Alpha King and a true Omega mate might mean for the balance of power among the kingdoms. Some of these nobles had spent years building influence through careful alliances, and the idea of an unexpected shift threatened everything they had worked to secure. Fear, more than anything else, made them dangerous. During the coronation feast, meant to celebrate Lyra's official crowning as queen, a plan was set into motion by those who wished to see her removed before she could take her place beside the king. In the middle of the celebration, as musicians played and nobles raised their glasses in toast, a sudden commotion broke out near the Eastern Hall. Hidden intruders, disguised among the palace staff, attempted to reach Lyra under the chaos of the crowded feast. Damien's instincts, sharpened by years as a warrior, caught the danger before most others even noticed. He moved quickly, placing himself between Lyra and the approaching threat, his calm demeanor shifting into the fierce protector the kingdom had always known him to be. Guards rushed in, and within moments, the intruders were subdued, but not before one of them lunged toward Damien in a final desperate attempt. In that instant, something inside Lyra awakened. Fear surged through her, but instead of freezing as she once might have, she felt a strange warmth rise from deep within her chest, spreading through her hands, as she instinctively reached toward Damien. A soft glow surrounded them both, and the wound that should have struck him faded before it could take hold, closing as if it had never happened at all. The hall fell silent once again, this time in wonder rather than mockery. The ancient bloodline gift, long thought extinct, had revealed itself, not as a mark of weakness as the court had always assumed of Omegas, but as a rare and powerful ability to heal and protect. The very trait that had made her an outcast for so long was the missing piece that completed the old prophecy, binding her fate to Damien's in a way no rejection could ever undo. Word of what happened spread quickly beyond the palace walls, and the fear that had driven the plot against her began to shift into something closer to respect. Those who had once seen her as lesser now understood that her worth had never been about rank at all. It had been hidden beneath assumptions no one had bothered to question. When the coronation resumed, Lyra stood beside Damien, not as a frightened girl pushed forward by embarrassed parents, but as a queen who had earned her place through her own quiet strength. The crown was placed upon her head, and this time, no laughter followed. Only silence, respect, and the quiet acknowledgement that the beast's bow had never been wrong. As the sun set over Ashgrave Palace that evening, Lyra looked out over the kingdom that had once rejected her without a second thought. She thought of the roses in the old garden, the ones that grew steadily, no matter who paid them attention. She realized she had grown the same way, patient and unnoticed, until the right eyes finally saw her for who she truly was. Beside her, Damien took her hand, his grip steady and sure. "Every kingdom that turned you away will remember this day," he said softly, "not because I am king, but because you were always meant to stand here." Lyra smiled, the weight of years of rejection finally lifting from her shoulders. She was no longer the Omega nobody wanted. She was the queen, whose quiet strength had tamed the beast of the fiercest alpha king in the land, and whose place beside him would never be questioned again.